Ready? Okay. Welcome to Joomla World Conference, first ever. Hopefully, definitely not the last, I'm assuming. We're here to talk about training your clients, obviously to use Joomla. I don't know much about anything else, so that's all I'm going to talk about. A little bit about me. My name is Kendall Cabe. I have been doing Joomla since right about 2007. Started as a hobby, kind of okay, I have time on my hands, I'll learn something. Then I got involved with local Joomla Chicago user group. Wouldn't say got sucked into it, but I volunteered to actually rewrite the initial 101 Kickstart stuff that we do every month. So a friend of mine and I, we rewrote it, started teaching it, have been doing it ever since. That was about 2008, so it's in about its 5th iteration right now. And then somewhere around 2010, my business partner and I started up X2 Technology, which does mostly integration type stuff where we take existing products, build Joomla sites, but then we also do the training and support of those sites with our clients. So that's where this presentation kind of came from. It came from how I went in to identify what I needed to know about how do I need to teach my clients, and it's all over the board. So it's ultimately, the presentation today is about identifying more of how to figure out how to teach your clients than it is to really show you how to teach Joomla, because if you're already teaching your clients, well, you kind of know how to do that. You know how Joomla works. So I'm not trying to teach you how Joomla works, because if you don't know that already, then you probably shouldn't be teaching your clients yet. So let's take a look at what we're going to look at. First question and overview we're going to talk about is, should I even train my clients? That's the first question. Then you want to determine your client type. And yes, there are tons of them. Every client presents a different potential learning mechanism. Then there are the learning styles. How do people actually learn? Then how do you teach? There are actually teaching styles that you want to look at to figure out what works best, and then what to teach. And this may change based upon new versions of Joomla, what you really need to teach your client, and it really depends on the client. And if we have time, I may actually get some of those guinea pigs out of the audience to come up and actually do a quick teaching thing of something, and then we'll get to the questions at the end. So at the beginning, let's just look at, should I train my clients? Not everyone can teach effectively. Not everyone can teach, actually. A developer may or may not be a good teacher. It all comes down to a few key points to find out if you would be a really good teacher. First one always is patience. Clients will test your patience. They always do, they always will, there's no way around it. If you can relate to users very well and relate easily to them, you don't get heavily frustrated when somebody's asking you a question 10 times. If you don't get frustrated and you can actually deal with them fairly easily, you might be a good teacher. You want to be able to converse in their language. A developer that talks development language is not going to train an end user very easily. It just doesn't happen. And I'll say right up front, I've actually come from both sides of the board. So I've done development, I have done training, I've done end user stuff. So I've got kind of that unique mix of, I've done it, a lot of it, and I can understand when I say something and I get the deer in the headlight look, that I have to change and revamp it. Because then it's like, then you see the light bulb go off, which is what you want to see happen. You want to see those users get that light bulb moment, that aha moment. It's like, oh God, that's what I've been missing. That goes into thinking like a user. If you're always thinking about what's happening behind the scenes, you're probably not thinking like a user. Remember that users can actually do something with a product that you didn't intend. So if you think like a user, you're going to figure out, oh wait, this isn't quite intuitive. There are some extension developers in the community that obviously need to bring a few users in and say, okay, how can we make this better? And a lot of them have started doing that. They've actually started getting into the whole user experience piece and have dramatically improved the product that they're offering, and now it's like worlds of difference between the 1.5 version and the 2.5 version. It's worlds of difference. The other thing is being comfortable in front of groups. If you would be scared of getting up here and doing what I'm doing right now, you probably don't want to be a teacher, because you're going to be anything from small groups to large groups depending on the size of your clients. Most of mine are small to medium businesses, and they're kind of 1 or 2 people that need to learn how to do this, maybe 4 or 5. Previous life, I did training for a business product that was report writing. I trained anywhere from 10 to 25 people. So it was large and small groups is what you may encounter depending on what size clients you actually go after. So now if you've made a decision, well, should I teach or not? And if you made a decision that, yes, I am going to teach my clients, then you need to understand, how do you determine what kind of client you actually have? What do they really need to know? In general terms, clients fall in 2 categories: technical, non-technical. There's some that fall kind of in between. They know enough to be dangerous, but they're not quite at that technical level. So that's the first step. Figure out if they have technical aptitude or if they don't. Because it really matters how you're going to teach somebody one way or the other. If they have technical aptitude, you can go deeper in depth. If they don't, I hate to put it this way, but you got to dumb it down. Because they need to know that this is all I have to really do. I don't need to worry about the other stuff. Click this button, I'm done. And it's kind of, that's the real difference. The specific types of clients, and you may actually have defined some of these yourself, and you may define some of these when you're trying to figure out how to teach somebody, but the general ones are, you do everything for me user, I don't want to touch it, and they do exist, and they are a type of client. They're easy to teach. You don't really teach them anything. Then you've got the sort of the blogger, article writer, who is actually, all they're really going to be doing is entering content. They're not going to do much more than that. Then you have full content developers that are going to possibly manage page layouts, where they may get involved with modules. They're doing the articles. They may be looking at content layouts, like if I'm doing a blog or a list layout, or if you're in stuff like K2, some of the other possibilities that are there. Then you get into people that are doing management of a site. They may be content writers, they may not be, but they're going to be people that are going to be managing users. They're going to be managing access rights. They're going to be possibly installing some extensions and pieces like that. Those are the ones that you're probably going to find are more technical in nature, or you hope that they're more technical in nature, because they're easier to teach if they are when you've got to get into some of the more complex stuff to figure out how it works. Then you get the full-blown administrator. Usually they're going to be a leg up on everybody else because they've already looked into a lot of this and they've already figured out some of it on their own. But then there's going to be, each type is going to have different things that you're going to teach them. And in some cases you can skip some of it because they're really not going to be doing it. And a lot of it may be based on their job description. If I'm an IT guy, I'm probably not writing content. So while he needs to know where it exists, if somebody says, hey, I'm having a problem, he's probably not going to be the content writer. So you can kind of gloss over that a little bit with those people and get into the more stuff that he's probably going to be doing on a daily basis. So there are basic 3 learning styles that exist. There's an auditory learner who learns by hearing. They ultimately sit down in a seminar, they are watching what's going on, but they're really picking it up because they're hearing it talked about. They're really not that great at sitting down and reading books and things like that. They'd rather have somebody tell them how to do it. A visual book learner is just the opposite. They can't always get it by somebody telling them how to do it. They physically have to sit down, look at it, and read a book on it. And they actually learn better that way by doing it, and then they can figure out, okay, then I'll go in and do it later and I'll ask for it. Seminars may be a good way to kind of get to these people. Then you've got the hands-on learners, which I would get into people that would be more on a mentoring situation where you sit down with them, you walk through them right on the site or a test site or whatever. You're walking them through, here's how we do it. Click this, click that. You're telling them, they're doing it. There may be a combination of all these learning styles that work well for some people and only one or the other works for others. And that's where you have to kind of get into the idea of everybody learns differently. Not everybody's going to be able to learn the same way. So if all you ever produce is documentation for a site and that's how you want people to learn how to use it, your client base may not actually be able to learn that way. And that may be why you keep getting those 10 and 15 messages a day that says, hey, I can't figure this out. You know, and you've told them like 5 minutes ago, and they're like, we'll check the documentation. Well, that doesn't work for them. So ultimately, you got to figure out, once you figure out the type of client, figure out how they learn best. And you can sit down with them and talk to them about, well, when you've done this before, or when you've done training on other things before, even if you're trying to learn how to do a recipe at home, how do you actually do it? Do you actually use a book? Do you use a recipe? Do you read the recipe, figure out how they tell you to do it? Or do you kind of fiddle around with it and kind of come up with your own stuff? General idea of what the recipe says, but hey, I'm going to try it myself. Or do you physically take and watch videos? Do you, go and listen to somebody show you how to do it, and then you go in and kind of copy them in the kitchen? You can ask questions like that that don't even relate to Joomla itself to figure out what kind of learning style works best for this person. And in some cases, there may be multiple styles that work well. Somebody might do well with books as a backup reference to sitting down and going through it with you as a hands-on situation. They have the book to go back and reference when they say, okay, what did he say I needed to do here? Wait a minute, I've got the documentation, let me find it. Oh yeah, here's what I do. Those little bitty steps that they miss is nice to have that backup when they say, okay, I need to go do this. Anybody have any questions so far?
So you got a group of 10 people that you're training, you interview each one of them?
I get a general sense. Sometimes I've sent out, if I've got a big group, I've sometimes sent out a questionnaire and I've asked the people, how would you rate this? I learned best with this, this, and this, which gives me an idea of what is possible. If it's a couple of people, you can ask them when you walk in the room, and you can kind of change your training based on the idea, or you can tell them right up front, we're going to be doing it this way. If you're having problems learning this, we may need to schedule more time to do something independently with you.
If you've got a mix of people.
If you got a mix of people, you may have to talk to them about the fact that if somebody's just not getting it, you may have to do something differently for that person. It's almost an upsell as well to say, hey, we want to get your people trained, but this person just isn't getting it this way. Can we talk about another way to get them trained, especially if they're going to be doing this? Yeah.
Person's learning style varies on what they're learning.
Correct. It does. They can actually learn certain things certain ways, but when it comes to potentially more technical stuff, their learning style usually matches, but sometimes it depends on what it is.
Right.
Yeah, it really does depend on the type of thing they're trying to learn.
Whether it's documentation or
Correct.
interface or
Correct.
whatever.
Yeah, and if it's something simple of just going in looking at the article manager, maybe they may be able to pick it up very quickly just from documentation, but when you get into doing menus and navigation and pieces like that, they may be better off doing hands-on learning.
Right.
So you may be able to say, well, here's full documentation on the article manager. We're going to go through the highlights here, but when we get to menu navigation, we're really going to go in and dig into it.
Yeah.
And that may be what you have to decide is which way is going to work best. I've had all types of clients, and the way that you have to really deal with it is when you're teaching a class or you're standing in front of somebody, you've got to learn to read your audience. You've really got to look and see whether or not the people are attentive. If they're doing something else, then they're obviously, something's not getting to them, or they don't see it's of benefit for them to be in the room at all. And in those people, you just kind of ignore them, because unless they're the actual boss, you kind of ignore them, because ultimately they're not there to learn, they're there to waste time, and they're the ones you kind of have to ignore when you're trying to read the audience. They're usually obvious because they'll be sitting there and you're talking, you look up, and all of a sudden you see them pop their head up and see what's going on because you stopped talking. So they're trying to figure out, hey, I need to look like I'm paying attention, but I'm really not. And unfortunately I can say, I've done this. Because I've been in a class that I was teaching already and I had to sit in on it, so it was like, okay, fine, I'll give the person some benefit of the doubt, but I really don't want to be here. So yeah, you've got to kind of read your audience and pick up on what the style is. How many people have heard of the deer in the headlight look? When you see somebody looking at it, it's like, oh my God, what is he talking about? Then you've got to either change how you're teaching something or go back and kind of rephrase it to try to get that person to understand. In a lot of cases, it's a matter of a couple of words difference, and they get it. What you want to see is you want to see those people sitting there, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I get it. And you see that light bulb kind of effect over their head that says, hey, I got this. You can kind of move on. Sometimes you just won't get that. Sometimes they get it a couple of days later once they've sat down in front of the computer and done it themselves a few times. Then they actually start getting, oh, that's what he was talking about. So, the teaching styles. Now that we know kind of the idea of what the learning styles are and how the clients are, you've got to look at what options do I have for teaching. There is the basic idea, tutorials, books, documentation, written material. Could be videos as well. That kind of starts falling into the seminar area when you get into the video stuff. But some of them are nothing more than a tutorial on video. So it helps, and you can mix them up if you find out that your client's learning style works better with books and video or books and a seminar. You might be able to push them towards a tutorial site, or if you do your own, to be able to say, okay, well, here's some documentation. If you don't quite get it, look at this tutorial because he walks you through it step by step. And you might be able to see it better that way, and they may learn between the two combinations. The second one is the seminar, which, like this, on a video, sitting down watching a webcast, basically you're talking, they're listening. In some cases it's a mix of seminar and hands-on, where they're sitting in front of the computer, they're walking through it with you. The stuff I used to teach when I was a consultant in the business intelligence industry, they were always in front of a computer. We were walking through step by step, getting something done. When they got to the end of the day, they had a finished product. They could sit there and say, we built this report on this data. And half the time I was there in a customized class where we were using their data directly. So they had something they could work with when they were done and figure out how it works. If you've got that kind of set up, or if you're sitting down with a client, you may be able to do something like that. If you've got 3 or 4 or 5 people that are involved, it might be easy to do that. Just depends on the setup. You have to make sure that the computers are set up properly, everything's ready to go before you get there, because what you don't want to do is spend the first half hour trying to get everybody's computer to work. That's the downside of doing the hands-on piece. If you've got a good technical staff that you can work with, like when I was in the other industry, we integrated with another technical staff that took care of the computers on site. We just came in and did the teaching. And we told them, if they're not working when we get there, we can't teach the class. So we kind of, there's more than once I actually had to almost walk away, call my boss and say, I can't teach it because computers don't work. And then they got something working, and it's like, okay, fine, we're ready to go. We're an hour late, but we're ready to go. So they were happy to deal with that, and they were happy I didn't have to walk away. The third teaching style would be basically mentoring. It kind of falls into the hands-on, sitting down with somebody, teaching them how to do it kind of training. With this type of teaching style, you're kind of sitting there, you're more telling them what to do. You may also sit there and actually do the stuff first and then have them switch seats. So you're kind of sitting there, you're teaching them how to do it, but you're letting them be immersed in it right along with you. In a lot of cases, when we do this type of teaching style, we've had them send us a list of things that they need to know how to do. Very specific things that this is what I do every day. I need to figure out exactly how to do this. Let's walk through it a few times. We'll do a few. And a lot of times, that's all they need to know. Once they've got that 5 or 6 things off their list, they're done. They're finished with what they need to know about their part of the system. This is usually more hands-on. And it's usually more 1-to-1, 1-to-2 type people. You would not normally do this with a large group. It's just a little time-consuming and very involved, because normally you have to do stuff up front to figure out what's going on. And with any of these teaching styles, it depends on your client. If your client wants generic Joomla training, great. You can probably make that 2 years in advance or a year in advance, not with the versions we have, but you can make it in advance, have it ready to go, hand it off to them, and it's all set. You don't have as much work to do with that kind of training where it's very generic. If you're doing specific client-specific work where you have to go in and teach them their system, make sure you put that into whatever you're doing. If you're bidding this out and you're doing training, I'm going to be on site for a whole day, well, that's 8 hours. Well, how many hours do you have to put in beforehand learning their system so you can train them on it? It might be standard Joomla, but what if they've gone in and they've done some weird thing with menus, or they've done some weird thing with modules, and you got to tell them how it works. If you didn't build the site and you're coming in to do the training, then how are you going to handle it? You've got to get that ahead of time to make sure you've got what you need all the resources and the ability to get what you need, preferably a copy of the site so you can actually play with it and potentially break it while you're trying to learn how it works. Never do it on a production site. I mean, that's almost given on anything. Never train on the production site. If you can get them to set up a dev site, use that. Because as soon as you're teaching somebody how to do something, somebody's going to hit the wrong button and something goes down. Maybe the home page just went away and now the site's sitting there with nothing on it. So yeah, it's a bad idea to do it on the production site if you're doing training. But yeah, you've got to factor that in with any of the teaching styles you're going to use. If you got to make documentation, if you built the site for someone, do you offer documentation as part of the initial bid? If you don't, it's a perfect upsell to be able to say, hey, we'll write the full documentation for your site if you want us to. You know, we'll give you minimal information on where things exist, but if you really want full documentation, that's extra. Because it takes time to write it. You know, and as clients, as people doing work for clients, you know, that's where our expertise comes into this. If you're already training them, that's where our expertise comes in to give them the documentation that's going to work well. So just a couple bits of info with this. What I found to be true is if you're working with someone, after about 1 to 2 hours max, you're going to get the deer in the headlight look almost constantly. They're going to be sitting there like, okay, I can't take anymore. You can't shove any more into my head. I need a break. You know, so we usually, if we're doing an all-day training, and with the other company it was always an all-day training, we always broke for lunch. We usually had at least a 15-minute break after about 2 hours. So we do about an hour and a half. We do 9 to 12. About 10:30, we'd stop for 15 minutes. It gives them time to walk away from the computer, get something to drink. Then they come back, and you'd be surprised that just for 15 minutes, it actually helps. They actually get that ability to kind of get more information coming in because they're able to process a little bit of it in their mind, and they can kind of go to the next step. So with a potential client, if I'm doing one-to-one, I usually don't go over 2 hours, and I tell them that up front. It's like, we're going to spend at the most 2 hours, because after that, you're going to lose everything. After that, you really will not retain it well. And, you know, we either have to put that break in there, and then maybe we can go longer. But even after 2 hours, I don't know about you guys, but depending on how involved the training is, I'm wiped out. You know, it takes a lot out of the trainer. That's the other aspect to this that I haven't talked about. Everything you're doing, it takes it out of you too. Not only the client is having to process this, but you're having to process, are they getting it? You know, are they actually getting what I'm teaching? Am I teaching it right? Do I need to slow down? Do I need to speed up? Do I need to go in more detail, less detail? So your mind is running just as fast as theirs is to stay ahead of them. So you kind of have to do it for yourself too, because that's ultimately, the longer you go, the less effective you are in actually getting the message across to your clients. You're going to forget something that's very important. Like my business partner the other day, we were working with ACL at the Joomla Chicago user group. And he was doing this thing, and he set up a group, did this and this, and went in, and he was having a user do this that had came up and was doing it and showing how easy it was to do. He forgot one step. It was very important. He forgot to add the access level and was wondering why he couldn't find it in the drop-down list. And somebody said, you forgot the access level. He's like, that's it. Off he went. Got the access level. She finished the exercise. Everything was done. So it's that one little thing, and that was at the end of about a 45-minute session. So, you know, so it's kind of that you just forget those little things that you've done it so much, you remember it, but when you're teaching somebody else, you've got to verify you've got everything written down. Not every style has to stand alone. As I've said this before, with the learning styles, you may do a combination to teach these people. You may do mentoring. After you've done a training, you may go back and do mentoring. You may do seminars and have resources that back it up. You might have documentation. You may have links to tutorials. You may give your clients access to a training site that's out there for Joomla. You know, you may give it to them for 2 months and say, here, you know, after that you pay for it, but here you go. Here's some great tutorials to use. You may do some other pieces. You may have somebody else write the documentation and you basically hand it off. But you need to figure out what's going to work best for your clients. And as was pointed out earlier, what happens if you have multiple clients? one of the methods you're going to give are probably going to end up being good enough for everybody. You're not always going to be able to get that little piece that gets everybody going, but that's where if you can work with the client and say, okay, Sue didn't quite get it. You know, does she need more of a hands-on situation? Do I need to sit down directly with her to figure out what's going on? Because maybe she learns a little differently than everybody else, and maybe she just needs that hands-on push to kind of get her going. That's something you need to work out with your client kind of up front. Yeah?
Do you have a particular formula that you found the most useful in the way that you'll kind of from start to finish through the training process? As in, a webinar followed by something else, or a particular order of techniques?
What we've normally done is, with most of our clients being 2 or 3 person shops, not everybody needs to be trained. We haven't done it in large groups a lot. We usually, when we do any project, we usually put 5 hours of training in the quote and say, you definitely need to leave this in there because you're going to need it. We start with a 2-hour training class. We go in, we show them all the basics of what they need to deal with. Depending on whether they want it or not, we'll either write up the documentation or we're in the process of developing some just simple standard Joomla tutorials that they'll have access to. So we give them that resource, for a period of time. They have it. We do the 2-hour training where we do the seminar or a one-on-one mentoring kind of thing for that first 2 hours. After the 2 hours, we tell them, use the site for 2 or 3 weeks. In that time, if you've got questions, kind of compile a list. If it's keeping you from doing work, send it to us ahead of time, then we'll get back to you. But if it's little things that you're missing, something's not quite right, sort of compile a list and let's touch base 2 weeks later. And if we have to, we'll walk back in, do another hour session to kind of go over those things that they didn't quite get right. And then after that, they've got 2 more hours or an hour or whatever's left, that when they hit that point of, well, I haven't done this in 2 weeks, now I got to remind myself how to do it, and they come up with those other questions, then they've got 2 more hours that they can contact us and say, okay, here's my next list, can we kind of go through this? And we found that usually after about 5 hours, if the person is truly using their site, and this is key, if they're using the site after about 5 hours of doing it and getting the extra training, they're usually where they need to be. They're usually kind of at that point of they've had that aha moment, they understand what's going on, they can look at the documentation and understand what we talked about during training, and they're good to go. In a lot of cases, I don't usually hear from them again after that for any further training unless there's something new they want to add to the system. For the general basic stuff of maintaining their site, 5 hours seems to be about right if you do it that way. The 2-hour initial, maybe a 1 or 2 hour follow-up, 2 to 3 weeks, maybe at most a month later, and then they've got the extra when they need it for about the next 2 or 3 months. Usually after about 3 months, they're not usually getting back to me saying, I'm having this problem still. They've kind of gotten it, they've worked through it a few times, and they're kind of happy. As far as how the teaching styles line up with the learning styles, unless you need that mix across the board, most of them line up kind of pretty close to the learning styles of your clients. So if they're good at book learning, then the documentation, the tutorials are going to be great for that person. If they're better with somebody teaching them, sitting down in a seminar is probably going to be the best for them. In most cases, having whatever primary, and I guess I would put it this way, whatever primary style works best for them, giving them that secondary is what actually helps. So if they really say, okay, well, I heard this, I get it, but I need to walk through it. So maybe they go and watch a tutorial again, or they go to the documentation and say, okay, well, here's the step I missed in my head. This is what I forgot. And then they go through it and run through it again, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, now I've got it. As with anything, for you or your clients, practice makes perfect. If that person does the training and they don't touch the site again for 2 months, they're not going to remember. They're going to be just as oblivious at that point as they were the first time you ever talked to them about Joomla. They're not going to remember. So if they don't have the referrals to go back, the reference sites or whatever it is to go back and say, what did I miss? They're not going to remember. They're going to have to keep coming back to you. The more they use it, the more they're going to remember. And I've had clients tell me that, is that I was great with this when we first did it. I was using the site, then work got busy, and it's 3 months later, and now I'm trying to go back and remember how to do it, and I don't. Can you give me a real 20-minute refresher course on this little part? This is all I can't remember. That works well. So a lot of clients, they may want to go ahead and pick up some kind of package of hours from you for support in training, and they may say, okay, I just want to have 3 hours sitting on the side, so if I forget something, I can come back to you. In a lot of cases, you are the client's safety net. As a company, our practice is we don't build you a site and walk away. We're there from you from the beginning to the end and beyond. Because we know that somebody's going to come around later. Maybe you get a new person that comes in your business. They need to know how to do it. Well, we built the site. We know how it works. Unless you've really totally changed it on us, we're going to be able to get that person up to speed pretty quickly for you. I've done it with other people's sites that I built. When it's somebody else's work, I automatically put in several hours with that training contract to say, I got to spend time on your site because I don't know how this is built. I don't know exactly how it works. I need to go in and play with it just to get my understanding to feel comfortable teaching you how to do it. And in a lot of cases with ones like that, it's more of a mentoring thing. They want you to sit down with them and walk through it. So again, practice makes perfect. Try to push that into your client. You've got to do this a fair amount in the first month or it will not stick. It won't become second nature. As soon as it becomes second nature, you're going to stop hearing from them because they know how to do it. They can get it every single time they sit down and do it. And after they've done it enough, coming back to it 4 months later, they'll still remember how to do it. Might take that little kick of reference to go back and say, oh yeah, that's what I forgot, but they're going to know where to go to find it, they're going to know how to do it, and they're going to practice again and get it back to being second nature. So once you've figured out all that piece and how it's going to work, what do you actually teach? What you teach depends heavily on what the client needs to know. If you're working with generic stuff, teach them generic stuff. If they need to know specifics of their site, you need to sit down and figure that out and figure out how you're going to teach it, how you're going to write the documentation, how you're going to come up with it to give them the same experience as if you were teaching them generic Joomla. That's the key, is that you want them to come out with the same knowledge as if they were learning Joomla from scratch to be able to manage their own site. And again, the tutorials in the books, you may give them generic information. Well, here's how you edit an article. Here's a tutorial on editing a Joomla article. It's not specific to your site, but hey, it'll tell you how to edit an article, how to find it, how to go in, how to manage it, rename it, change some of the settings. A lot of that doesn't have to be specific to the site, but when it's something specific, like in K2, if you've done K2 for content and you've added a bunch of extra fields, well, that's not in generic K2. You need to tell them, well, these fields are what you set to make this show up on the site. If you've got some special code that relies on the field set in the article, then ultimately you need to make sure that they know that, and that's not a generic K2 or a Joomla thing. That's the kind of things you point out in documentation when you're doing it for a specific client site. Otherwise, that little piece gets lost, and somebody has to go in and dig around and figure out, okay, what does this actually do? So what would we teach to somebody that's a do-it-for-me client? Very little. If you're doing it all for them, you need to know how to do it, but they don't necessarily. If they're paying you to do it, create the documentation anyway. Make the tutorials that you may offer to them, because at some point, once they've been sending stuff to you for 2 or 3 months and they realize it takes you 5 minutes to do something, they start realizing, hey, it might take me 5 minutes to do that and I don't have to pay you. I mean, our goal as a company for us is we want to work ourselves out of a job to a point. We want to do the big stuff for you. We want to add that new extension. We want to help you redo your template. We want to do those kind of things. We want you to maintain the content because you're the one writing it. You're the one that should be maintaining it. And you're the one that knows the business. That's exactly right. I could sit down and write content all day long on a bakery, but it probably ain't going to be about your business. And it may not be right either, you know. So I may be putting something in there that's like has nothing to do with baking,
Right.
but I'm not going to know that,
Right.
you know. That's why when somebody wants to do the content or they want to do it, try to push them into maintaining their own site. Because in the long run, the more they are invested in doing their own site, the more they will actually change it. Yep.
The more they will appreciate your service, the better value that they get in the end.
Absolutely.
The happier that customer will be.
Correct. If they know that, basically they're looking at it, they're saying, okay, now I know what you've done for me. I really appreciate that. It's like, okay, now you've given me something that's going to make my business grow. Yeah.
And because of all those factors, they're referred in your business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you give them a good experience and you give them a way to maintain their site, you're not just giving them a website, you're not giving them a web presence, you're extending their business online. That's the whole point of a website. If you're putting up a brochure site for somebody, forget it. I mean, anybody can do that. Go tell them to do it with QuickBooks. The QuickBooks website that says here, put up a little site builder site. That's all they need. They don't need Joomla for that. But if you're maintaining that site, build it on Joomla, because down the road, they're going to start seeing the benefit of having it, and they're going to want to expand it. So if you can convince them into going ahead and doing it there, you just made your job a lot easier. Because now you've already got it on the platform, it's going to allow you to expand their business. So the next one, the blogger writer, they need to know the basics. They need to know how to get in the back end of the site, which is amazingly something that not a lot of people know how to do. I actually had a client that his previous developer went bankrupt and walked away, had never told him how to access the administrator on the site. There was a link at the bottom of the page that says log in. Well, the link went away. So he's like, how do I get in to edit my content? He had no idea, none whatsoever. I told him where to go to do it. He logged in and said, oh my God, thank you. He says, I've been trying to find that because I've been needing to take some stuff off that we're either not doing or is out of date. So he was exceptionally appreciable of that. Just that little fact of add administrator to the end of it, and there you are. Other guy never told him. Yeah, that one got me. Teach them how to add categories, because if they're doing blogging or something like that, they're probably going to need to know how to do that. Teach them how to edit the articles. Go into the individual pieces of the article manager of how can you publish, unpublish something there right from the article manager. Teach them how most of what you're going to do when you're teaching somebody to write articles is the WYSIWYG. Teach them how to use the WYSIWYG effectively. If they can't use that, then you're going to be getting all those questions. Well, I tried to put in this image and it didn't work. And what button am I supposed to press? Make sure that they know what each thing does that they're going to be using on a regular basis. Images, content, horizontal rules, how to add a table. But anyway, how to add a table if they need it, and there are reasons for tables. So teach them how to do that stuff. The simple stuff that they will get them 85% of what they need to know about writing articles in Joomla. And please, please, please tell them never paste Word directly into Joomla. Even if you have an editor that supposedly strips it out, never, ever, ever paste Word into Joomla. Because you're going to reformat it anyway, because most of the formatting is not going to come across. So tell them, write it in Notepad, write it in a text editor, copy it into Joomla, and then do your formatting there. Or better yet, write it all in Joomla. If you say unpublished on the article, it doesn't go up until you're done with it. Yeah?
JC has a paste special link which strips the formatting.
Yeah, exactly. And some of the formatting is even stripped that you don't want to go away. Yeah. So that's part of the problem with that. But it does work. There is one with JCE that previous versions it was paste from Word. Now it's like paste from special formatting stuff. So it does work. It does work, but it's better not to worry about it. Just have them write it plain text and then format it in Joomla where they're going to have to format it anyway. All right. Yeah, that would actually be cool. Who just took that idea and is going to work on it now? Please. Yeah, we need dictate actually. All right, teach them how to assign articles to the correct category. Somebody writes an article, it goes into whatever the default is that comes up, or they put it in uncategorized, not realizing they need to put it somewhere else. Make sure they understand how to get those assigned. And then teach them how to publish and unpublish the articles. If it's going to be timed sessions where they want it to show up 2 weeks from now and it's going to go down a month after that, show them how to use the start and end publishing dates. Tell them how they work. whether they use them or not, at least explain to them, you can do this if you need to. Otherwise, don't worry about it. It's going to start when you start it. It's going to stop when you turn it off. But if they want to do something like that and they're going to kind of get into it, at least tell them how it works. Also tell them where the page title is, like telling them how to change the page title so that, because it's kind of hidden, always has been. People are like, well, where's this title coming from? I don't know where it's at. Or how do I change this so it says something else up here and something else down here? Teach them how to do that. Those are the little things that'll make their life a lot easier. So when you get to the full content person, they're going to be more involved than just that content writer. They're going to probably end up needing to know how to do navigation, as well as putting in content. You'll probably teach them additional topics such as the different content layouts in Joomla or K2 or whatever content management you're using. They may get into module placement and management. They may be responsible for that, so you need to get into the module pieces with them. You probably are not going to get into user stuff, template stuff, plugin stuff, probably just modules and some menu pieces. Maybe not even the menu pieces, but they need to kind of know how it works. So if they're trying to figure out what kind of content I'm building, how do I get it to happen in Joomla? So if they need to know this would work best with a blog layout as opposed to a list, then that's the kind of stuff they're probably going to need to know what the differences actually are. Then you get into your site management people. They're usually involved more in running of the site. Some may also do content. These people are going to be ones that are probably looking at other people's content. They may be editors or publishers that are working with somebody else that's actually writing the content. That may also be the full content person as well. They may be helping other people. But these people will probably be ones that will be doing user management. When a new user comes into the company, they need to get them added. If they're using ACL, they may need to know how that works. If I need to have somebody do this, what group do I put them in? They may also do extension management. That may be more on the administrator side, but they may end up adding extensions. Hopefully, you've taught them well enough that if they need to add something, please call you first and talk to you about it before they just go and do it. Unless you're not maintaining their site anymore, then they're on their own. But if they talk to you first, at least then you can tell them, are there going to be problems with installing that extension? Maybe it's an extension that's been vulnerable for the last 2 years and it actually hasn't been fixed. They're not going to know that. They're just going to go out and maybe find the extension directory and say, oh, that's cool, I want to install that. That's kind of where it's nice for you to be their safety net, for them to come back and ask you those kind of questions. Yeah?
When in doubt, run the Cabe.
Yeah.
When in doubt.
Correct. That, yeah, definitely.
When in doubt.
If you're not sure about something, run a backup.
Run a backup.
Absolutely.
Safety net.
Exactly. Nice plug for the guy in the back of the room, by the way.
Well, I'll back him 100 miles and 100%.
Oh yeah, so will I.
Yeah.
So if you guys have never met him, Nicholas is sitting in the back of the room that built the Cabe backup. So he's the one to thank for those times that you've done something stupid and you were able to restore it. So, all right.
Nicholas has been a godsend for me.
Oh yeah, he has. I've had it more than once. Was thankful I had a backup.
Yeah.
These guys may also be involved with template management. They're probably going to be the ones that are. They're going to work with the designer to come up with a new template, or if there's issues with the template, they're probably going to be ones tasked with fixing it, or at least getting it fixed. So they need to know how the template stuff works, the difference in styles and templates, and how to manage it, and assign new stuff to the template. Like if a layout needs a certain style that you've got defined, different colors or something, they're the ones probably going to be managing it. Then the administrator, that's where you're going to get into some of the bigger aspects. They're going to pretty much be in control of everything. They may not do any one thing actively like content creation or content management, but they're going to be involved with pretty much everything on the site. You're going to teach them the site configuration. You're going to look at the overall site configuration, the global config. They may even be involved with the server config. They may have access to the cPanel. They may have access to other pieces that normally go outside the Joomla world, but they know that, and if they actually have access to that or need access to it, they need to know how to get there, because sometimes you may have to upload something with FTP that's just too big to do with inside Joomla, like video files. you're not going to load it with Media Manager. It's going to time out on you. So they may need to know how to do an FTP to the site to upload those big files. Yeah?
The other piece that I really don't see them is related to security.
Yep.
Perhaps anyways, like you just mentioned, Media Manager, if you use an Explorer or some of those types of
Yep.
tools, not having them there, or,
Correct.
Put them in and get them out.
Correct.
Or how to configure that security, or at least the importance of it.
Yeah. This person is going to be one that they're probably going to be a step up above everybody else, and they're going to need that little bit of a kick to say, here, go out and look at this, you need to know this. And that's one of the security things. That's another whole piece of the puzzle that somebody needs to know about it, and normally it's probably going to end up being possibly you if you built the site, because a lot of the clients we've dealt with, they don't want to go that far into it, or they don't have anybody that can go that far into it, so they're still going to come back to you for that, potentially. So make sure you guys know how to manage it. And with everything on here, you've got to know it before you can teach somebody else. So if you're not good in a particular area, make something up in your mind. Make something up. Make up, like with ACL. If you've never played with it, go play with it. It's actually kind of fun. See how much you can break. It's actually kind of fun. And then once you've broken it, how do you get it fixed? That's how you learn how to do this, and that's how you teach clients not to do it in the first place. That's the whole key, is keep them away from the stuff that they shouldn't be dealing with, but if they get there, how do I get them out of it? And get them into the stuff where it's going to really benefit them and get them going. And then backup and disaster recovery, these people are going to be the ones to do it. And with that said, with the fact that there are these types of clients, you may have a client that is absolutely every type. They may have to be every type. So you've got to find out how much they're willing to do and figure out what you need to teach them to be able to make them effective and give them a way to use Joomla effectively to grow their business so that they can keep going, and maybe down the road they hire somebody to take on some of this stuff because now their website has brought them in so much business, or they've gotten them so much business, now they got the money to do it. And if you're working with small to medium-sized businesses, you'll find out that that is very true. If their website brings in new business, they see a benefit to it, they see a reason to continue with it and spending money on it, and therefore they're going to keep coming right back. And so if you help them do that and teach them how to use it, it's going to be a really big thing. So just a couple of final takeaways. Practice makes perfect, as I said, for you and your clients. Match your training regimen to your client's learning type. As I said, multiple types, mix and match the teaching styles to give them what they really need, to give them the best training experience, the best user experience with Joomla. Not everybody gets it the first time. So if you sit down with somebody and then a week later they call you back up, well, I can't quite get this right, what am I doing wrong? Not everybody gets it the first time. Read your audience. This is a big one. If you're teaching in a larger group or even one-to-one, read your audience. The deer in the headlight is not a good one. If you're seeing it very often, change your style. You're going to have to step back and kind of come at it from a different direction because obviously the client isn't getting it the way you're teaching it. Either that or they had a bad day. And it's not always the case that they're not getting it. Sometimes they've just had a bad day. They may not be able to get it that day, and maybe you need to reschedule. Maybe they've had a death in the family, or they've had a problem at work that's caused them a lot of headaches, and they're thinking about that more than they are this. That has a huge impact. If you're not in a good mood and you're not ready to learn this, you're not going to learn it. And you've got to kind of get to that. Have patience. We're all in this together. You're trying to get your client to where they're going to work well with this site and they're going to use it to increase their business. You're trying to get new clients, so we're all trying to get this where we're happy and we're having happy clients walk away because they do send you more business and they talk to people. You never know where client referral is going to come from, and you never know where that client is going to talk to somebody else. Like somebody may be here at this conference that you worked with 2 years ago, and they're talking to somebody else that comes to you later because they recommended you to talk to them. You never know where it's going to come around, so that's kind of how it works. I just got the high sign that we're about ready for lunch. I've got about 5 minutes to do last questions. Yeah.